The wind had changed just before midnight. Ethan Calloway noticed it the moment he stepped onto the back porch of his farmhouse with a lantern in one hand and a coat thrown over his flannel shirt. At 51, Ethan had spent his whole life on that patch of land in western Colorado, where the pastures rolled into low cedar hills and the nights were usually quiet enough to hear cattle shifting in their sleep. But that night the air felt wrong, too still in some places, too sharp in others. The horses in the lower paddock were restless, moving in tight, nervous circles instead of settling near the fence line, and the old livestock dog Boone stood rigid beside the porch steps with his hackles raised. Then came the sound, not a coyote yip, not a fox scream, not the bark of a neighbor's dog. A low, rough cry from the edge of the barn. Ethan set the lantern down and reached automatically for the rifle mounted just inside the mudroom door. Mountain lions were rare near the house, but not unheard of, especially in winter when prey ran thin in the hills. He had lost 2 goats over the years to predators, and he knew better than to walk blind into the dark with nothing in his hands. His wife, Nora, appeared in the hallway behind him, tying her robe tighter. "What is it?" "Something's out by the barn." "Coyotes." Ethan shook his head once. "Too big." Nora's face changed. "Wake Luke?" Their son was 23 and home for a few weeks helping with repairs before heading back to Grand Junction. Ethan considered it, then looked out through the dark again. "No, stay inside." He stepped off the porch into the cold. The yard was silver under a thin slice of moon. Frost glittered on the fence rails. Beyond the house, the barn stood black and still except for one shifting shadow near the open side gate. Boone gave a deep warning growl but did not run forward. That alone set Ethan's nerves humming. Boone feared very little. Ethan raised the rifle. The shape moved. It stepped into the open just enough for the moonlight to catch it, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A mountain lion. Big, lean. Tawny coat darkened along the back. Tail low, ears pricked forward. It stood no more than 30 yards from the barn doors, looking not at the chicken coop or the goat pen, but directly at Ethan. He tightened his grip. The lion did not crouch to spring. It did not bare its teeth. Instead, it turned its head sharply toward the barn, then back at him. Ethan frowned. The lion paced 3 steps toward the building, stopped, and looked at him again. Every instinct told him this was wrong. A healthy cougar near a farm at midnight should be avoiding light, noise, and people. It should have melted into the dark the moment he appeared. But this one was still there, tense and alert, as if trying to keep his attention. Boone whined now instead of growling. Ethan took 2 slow steps sideways, keeping the rifle trained. The lion immediately moved again, not toward him but toward the side entrance of the barn. It gave a short, harsh sound deep in its throat and looked back once more. Not a threat, a signal. Behind him, the farmhouse door creaked open. "Ethan?" Nora whispered from the porch. "Stay back," he said, never taking his eyes off the animal. By then, Luke was there too, pulling on boots, his face pale in the porch light. "Dad?" "Call the sheriff and wildlife control," Ethan said. "Now." Luke disappeared inside without argument. The lion paced again, more agitated this time. Then it went to the barn entrance and struck once at the wooden frame with one paw before retreating into the yard. Ethan's heart began to pound harder. There was something in the barn. He thought first of calves, then of the mare due to foal in late spring, then of the old tabby barn cat and her litter somewhere in the hay. But the lion's behavior still didn't fit. If it wanted an easy kill, it would have taken one and gone. Instead, it stood in the open, exposed and vulnerable, waiting for him to understand. Ethan lowered the rifle just a fraction. He moved slowly toward the barn. The lion did not stop him. Every few steps, Ethan paused, expecting the animal to bolt or charge. It did neither. It followed at a distance along the outside fence, head swinging between Ethan and the barn, muscles tight as rope. When Ethan reached the side door, he heard it. A horse screaming, not a neigh, not a snort, a full panicked, violent scream from inside the stall row. Ethan shoved the door open. The lantern light from outside barely reached the interior, but it was enough to show chaos. One of the interior stall gates had come loose and swung half off its hinges. Feed buckets were overturned. A shovel lay snapped near the tack wall. In the far corner stall, his chestnut mare, Daisy, was thrashing in terror, eyes rolling white, and wrapped around one of her hind legs was barbed wire. Ethan stared in disbelief. A section of old fencing, probably dragged loose by the wind earlier that evening, had caught and twisted around her leg when she spooked. Every kick had pulled it tighter. Blood streaked her hock and cannon bone. The more she fought, the worse it became. If she went down hard in that narrow stall, she could shatter the leg or tear herself open even more deeply. Oh no! He lunged for the tack hooks where he kept wire cutters. Behind him, Boone barked wildly from the doorway. Then Ethan heard another sound, a thin, high cry from the hay storage alcove beyond the stalls. He swung the lantern higher. There, half hidden behind stacked bales, crouched a small mountain lion cub, maybe 3 months old. Big pawed, spotted faintly with the last of its kitten markings, pressed flat with fear. One forepaw was trapped beneath a fallen hay rack that had collapsed against the wall. The cub twisted and cried again, but could not free itself. Ethan went still. Everything snapped together in an instant. The mother mountain lion had not come to hunt. She had come because her cub was trapped inside the barn, and Daisy's panic had likely started when she smelled or saw the cub, kicking until the wire caught her leg. The mother had appeared in the yard because she had no other way to reach the cub without risking the full chaos of the barn. Luke burst into the doorway, breathless. Sheriff's on the way, wildlife officer too. Then he saw the cub and stopped dead. "Dad!" "Don't come in fast," Ethan said sharply. "You'll spook the mare more." The mare slammed the stall wall again. Ethan could hear the barbed wire scraping bone. He made a decision in the space of one heartbeat. "We handled Daisy first. What about the lion?" Ethan glanced toward the doorway. The mother stood outside in the yard, visible through the open entrance, every muscle coiled but holding herself back. "She's letting us." He handed Luke the lantern. "Keep the light steady. If Daisy goes down, we're in trouble." Together they worked their way into the stall, talking low to the mare. She was trembling so hard the whole stall seemed to shake with her. Ethan grabbed a lead rope, looped it carefully around her halter, and leaned his weight, just enough to keep her from spinning. Luke crouched at the injured leg with the cutters. "Hurry," Ethan muttered. "I'm trying." The wire had twisted tighter than either of them expected. Blood slicked Luke's hands. Daisy screamed again and nearly knocked him backward. Outside, the mother lion gave a deep guttural call, not aggressive, urgent. "I know," Ethan whispered through clenched teeth, though he didn't know whether he was speaking to the horse, the cub, or the wild mother pacing the dark. At last, the final strands snapped free. The mare lurched, then stumbled sideways, suddenly released. Ethan got her out of the stall and into the center aisle before she could collapse. She was limping badly but standing. "Get her into the side pen," he told Luke. "Slowly." Luke led Daisy out the rear gate, Boone following anxiously behind. Now only Ethan, the lantern, and the trapped cub remained in the barn, and the mother mountain lion outside. Ethan turned toward the hay alcove. Up close, the cub looked smaller than he had first thought. Thin, frightened, one paw pinned under the slanted weight of the hay rack. Its little face was flecked with dust, eyes huge and fixed on him. It hissed weakly when he approached, but the sound broke halfway through into something more desperate. "All right," Ethan murmured. "Let's see what trouble you got yourself into." The rack was heavier than it looked. He set the rifle aside, braced one boot against the floorboards, and lifted. The old wood rose just enough. The cub yanked its paw free and shot backward into the corner, favoring the leg but clearly not broken. Ethan stepped away at once. For 1 second, the cub just stared at him. Then it bolted past his legs, down the aisle and out through the barn door into the moonlight. What happened next was the part Ethan would replay in his mind for years. The mother lion rushed forward so fast he instinctively reached for the rifle again, but she didn't come for him. She went straight to the cub, lowered her head, and touched her nose to its face, then along its side, checking it with frantic, almost disbelieving urgency. The cub pressed against her chest with a rough little cry. The mother looked up. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, hand half lifted, rifle forgotten. For one long second, man and mountain lion stared at each other across the frosted yard. Then the lion turned, nudged the cub ahead of her, and disappeared with it into the cedar dark. The sheriff arrived 10 minutes later with red and blue lights washing the pasture fence. Wildlife officer Mara Jensen came shortly after, listened to the story in total silence, and then walked the barn herself with a flashlight, examining the fallen hayrack, the paw marks in the dust, the blood on the wire, the tracks in the yard. When she returned, she looked at Ethan with an expression that was half amazement and half professional caution. "You did the right thing not firing." Ethan let out a slow breath. "Almost didn't." Mara nodded. "Most people would have." Nora came out with blankets and coffee while Luke retold the story twice, each time sounding like he believed it less. Daisy's leg needed stitches, but the local vet said she'd recover. The old barbed wire was hauled off the property the next morning, along with every loose scrap of fencing Ethan could find. No one slept much before dawn. By breakfast, word had already spread to the neighboring ranches. Some called it nonsense. Some swore Ethan must have imagined the lion asking for help. Others, especially those who had spent enough years around wild country, only nodded and said the animals did strange things when their young were involved. Mara returned 2 days later with trail cameras. "If that female is denned nearby, I want to make sure she keeps her distance from the livestock now that the cub's free." They placed cameras along the cedar ridge behind the farm and near the dry creek bed running west. Over the next week, they caught brief nighttime images, the mother moving like a shadow between junipers, the cub limping less each night, both of them staying well clear of the barns. Then, on the 8th night, one image showed something that made even Mara sit back in silence. The mother lion and cub had stopped at the far edge of Ethan's field. Between them in the grass lay a freshly killed jackrabbit. Not eaten, not hidden. Left there. Mara studied the photo for a long moment. "I'm not saying mountain lions bring gifts." Ethan crossed his arms. But I am saying that wild animals sometimes mark places and moments in ways we don't fully understand." The rabbit remained untouched until sunrise when coyotes took it. Ethan never spoke publicly about the jackrabbit. He knew how it sounded. But the rest of the story he told exactly as it happened, especially when people laughed at the idea that a predator could come close to a house for any reason other than hunger or aggression. "Truth is," he said once to Luke as they repaired the stall gate a week later, "I saw a threat and reached for a gun, and maybe most nights that would have been the right call. But not every animal that comes out of the dark is there to harm you. Sometimes it's just out of options." Spring came early that year. Daisy healed with only a faint scar. Boone returned to sleeping through the night. The horses settled, the ridge greened. And though Ethan occasionally found tracks at the far side of the property after rain, the mountain lions never came near the barn again. Still, on certain quiet nights when the wind shifted over the cedar hills and the yard fell still, Ethan would step out onto the porch and look toward the dark tree line. Not nervously, not exactly. More with the strange respect that comes after seeing fear, love, and desperation wearing the face of something wild. Because once, just once, a mountain lion had appeared on his farm at midnight, and instead of taking a life, it had trusted him with one.